Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, you're good. We can hear you from.
If folks accepted to settle, we'll continue the presentation. Just go to the next slide. Thank you all for coming. We're excited to see such great attendance. We're going to go through some introductions initially and then go through the attached agenda, ultimately building up to discussing the preliminary recommendations we have for this study. Go to the next slide. So, we're here essentially representing a study completed by the town through the local council of governments, the Naugatuck+Valley Council of Governments, that essentially functions as kind of community level, county level planning organization. And then that's been completed by my firm, NVCOGCT. We're the consultant that's completed the technical work. Next slide. You can go to the next slide as well. Just to give a little bit of a background here, the project was initiated to address multimodal safety, namely pedestrian automobile conflicts along Route 6, centered around the two historic districts in town. The northern boundary of our study area is Flanders Road, and then the southern boundary was the town line. Next slide. The focus of the study was on connecting a lot of the potentially pedestrian-based uses around, such as the economic development centers in the current downtown, the antique shops and the like, as well as parks and schools that are adjacent to Route 6. And as part of that, in the existing conditions analysis, we came down and did a site walk in the summer of 2024. That's what that photo is from. And the study process included coordination through an advisory committee formed from some of the town agencies and commercial interests, as well as general public outreach and publishing things through our website and one previous public meeting. Next slide. So the study began in 2023. We did some traffic counts throughout 2024, conducted our existing conditions analysis, which we presented last spring, I think that was. We then came out and have been working with our advisory committee with the DOT and initially presented those recommendations to the advisory committee last week. I will say that coming out of that, we got some pretty strong feedback about one of the concepts. We haven't fully had time to revise this presentation since then, but I think, have taken some of that feedback into account in terms of the potential intersection reconfiguration near Hollow Road. And Evan, as we get more into the presentation, we'll discuss some of the specifics there. Go to the next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Evan for the remainder of the presentation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Evan, and next slide, please. So yeah, I'm just going to be talking about the existing conditions. Keep this pretty short in the interest of time. So Route 6 in your town is a two-way urban minor arterial. That's the fancy technical word for it. Some lanes split off and create turn lanes at Sherman Hill Road and Middle Quarter Road. Most intersections along the entire corridor are unsignalized, but there are 4 signalized intersections, which we spend a lot of time focusing on. There are pedestrian facilities, but importantly, often only on one side, or sort of they don't entirely connect, and there are no bicycle accommodations present. The posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour in the central section of the town. And as Casey mentioned, we're going from Flanders Road on the far north to to town line. Or the town line is the boundary, but the southernmost major intersection we're looking at is Middle Quarter Road. Next slide, please. So here's just a map. We've called out the primary intersections and the secondary intersections. Middle Quarter Road, as I just mentioned, Sherman Hill Road, Sycamore Avenue 317, Washington Road, and Flanders Road, moving south to north. And of course, we have these secondary intersections, which we also focused on while creating the concept. Next slides, please. So as I said, it's mostly unsignalized intersections. 5 primary intersections in the study area, 4 of which are signalized. And critically, there's a flashing light signal located at Quantipoc Trail. I should mention NVCOG separately studied that, as we heard a lot of comments about the safety of that particular intersection. And they separately studied that, but we're going to put what they found into the appendix of our report. So it's sort of attached, sort of disattached, but we did consider it. These are the key connections: Route 61, Washington Road, Sycamore Avenue, Sherman Hill Road, and then there's connections to I-84, not direct connections, of course. As I mentioned, there's mixed pedestrian facilities, often only on one side. No cyclist facilities. The cross-section width, the width from curb to curb, is about 33 to 34 feet. Grade-wise, it's mostly flat, although there are some hills in the southern area of the route that create some issues. There are 3 roadway curvature issues which we found and which we propose to improve upon in terms of safety, and those are Mountain Road, Judson Avenue, Pomperaug Avenue, and Middle Quarter Road, and around Curtis Road, which is the far south section of town. Street lighting is about every 300 feet, although that varies quite a bit, with some areas have lamps closer together, about 150 feet apart. Next slide, please. So we identified key crossing deficiencies. At Middle Quarter Road, there's no east-west or north-south marked crosswalk. Moving further north at Park Road and Hollow Road area, there's no east-west marked crosswalks between 317 and Sherman Hill Road. So that creates a pretty big distance that pedestrians cannot easily or safely cross east-west between. And this limits access to Hollow Park. We also heard from all of you, and we saw ourselves when we did the site visit, there's limiting yielding behavior at Mountain Road. That's a fancy word for most people don't stop. Many do not stop. And so though there's already an existing beacon there, flashing beacon, we are proposing some improvements at that location. Yes, next slide, please. So we looked at crash density using data from CTDOT, and this is probably not any surprise to all of you, but you can see a couple of key locations pop out, mostly the signalized intersections, because those are the higher volumes. But of course, Route 47, Washington Road really pops out. To a somewhat lesser extent, Flanders Road, 317, and certainly Sherman Hill Road are pretty high crash locations along this corridor, and that informed our recommendations. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So how do we propose to fix this? We came up with an initial concept of a cross section and of a shared use path. And we came up with this based on a pretty deep analysis of topography, physical constraints, utility poles, integration with existing infrastructure, and then connecting to adjacent facilities, either existing or planned in the town or immediately outside of it. So a shared use path, and we presented about this last time, is sometimes also called a side path when running parallel to a roadway. But we're going to try to stick with the shared use path term here. It accommodates all users, so pedestrians, bicyclists, and others. People on scooters, I know, are increasingly common, we've heard. And they're in a shared space, generally speaking. And we chose it because it most completely separated those vulnerable users from drivers along this corridor. And there's relatively high traffic volumes and speeds along this corridor. So separating those users we thought made the most sense. And additionally, the Woodbury Plan of Conservation and Development, which is sort of the key planning document of your town, mentioned the importance of improving bike safety and comfort on Route 6. And we felt that could best be achieved through a shared use path. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you a little bit of technical guidance. The FHWA, the federal government, uses guidance based on traffic volume and traffic speed, and they sort of plot those on an XY axis. And they say if you have a certain amount of volume and a certain amount of speed, you are recommended to use a certain facility. And the higher those two values, the greater level of protection one in theory needs to provide a similar level of comfort. So as you can see here, we're talking about in your town, the speed limit's generally 30, but many people, as you all know, are going higher than that. And the AADT, annual average daily traffic, is generally over 8,000 along the corridor. So if you look at us where we are on this leftmost guidance, we're sort of right there. So it makes sense to either do what's called a separated bike lane or a shared use path. And as you can see, there's two different charts. The leftmost one is a what's called a rural town context. And so that makes, I'm sorry, it's called urban core, suburban, and rural town context left. And then on the right, we have rural roadways. Next slide, please. So in terms of design, a shared use path can range from about 8 feet. That's not ideal, but you can use that for a short distance to 12 to 14 feet, which is ideal, especially if you have higher volumes. You can separate users through a striped path, a striped line, but this is not normally necessary, and that's not recommended in your town. We just don't see there being as much volume to require that. Those widths above don't include shoulders or clear space, so you have to account for a few feet, for foliage or trees to sort of separate the path from cars. And generally speaking, that you're looking for a horizontal separation about 5 feet between the shared use path and the side of the roadway. Next slide, please. So the general concept we came up with, and we screened your town using those factors I talked about, topography and space. So we are proposing a shared use path along the eastern side of the roadway in the southern portion of your town, extending from Woodbury Place, Constantine's Restaurant, which is just immediately north of the town line, to the intersection of Hollow Road, Doolittle Hill Road, Main Street, and Park Road. At that point, north of that intersection, more specifically, we are proposing that shared use path would then transition onto the western side of the roadway to optimize connectivity and accessibility. And frankly, there was more space on that side. So we're anything we're recommending, we're trying to minimize disruption, minimize cost, minimize all those negative side effects, right? And as Casey mentioned, we are proposing urban design improvements near Hollow Park. We are walking that back initially based on comments we heard at the path, based on some negative comments we heard at those urban design improvements. We'd love to hear your views here too. But we are walking that back, just FYI. And we're making other strategic intersection improvements. Next slide, please. So we took two right away sort of sample locations. We took the existing space, and as you can see on the left is the existing in terms of feet, and the right shows future widths. And so we, of course, had proposed to do this within the right of way, and so we're bounded by that width. We took two sample locations just to see what this would look like, to visualize it. The first location is between Sherman Hill Road and Old Sherman Hill Road at the Dollar General. Location 2 is between 317 Sycamore Avenue and Mountain Road when we're on the west side of the street. Next slide, please. So location 1, as you can see here, as I said, it's near the Dollar General. We're looking northward on the top. And as you can see, we're just proposing to add that shared use path on the east side of the roadway. So nothing on the west side, we're keeping that the same. We're just improving that facility on the east side. And as you can see here on the bottom, we have a visualization, which we won't show for you today, just because it's a little slow, but it does show moving cars and moving people. And as you can see, that path is on the right. Next slide, please. Okay, I think it's going, but next slide. There we go. Okay, location 2 is near Drakely Real Estate, just north of the intersection with 317, as I mentioned. And on the east side, we have pretty narrow sidewalks, limited parkway space on the east side. But there is a wide right of way on the west side. So as you can see here, looking northward on the top, we widen out your sidewalk, create a shared use path on the west side. And then on the bottom, you can see, looking southward now, toward 317, you can see what that would look like in your town. Next slide, please. Okay, so where should we begin and end? We just want to give a little bit of background here. As I mentioned before, the exact terminus is at Woodbury Place, right around Constantine's Greek restaurant. And then on the northern side, we propose to go all the way to Flanders Road because there's some pretty dense housing development on Quasick Road. However, that requires crossing the river and would be more involved, more expensive, et cetera. So, Middle Road Turnpike could serve, and we're recommending to serve as an interim northern endpoint. That would, in theory, allow access to Naugatuck High School. Caveat here, there's not a sidewalk on Middle Road Turnpike, so it would sort of depend upon creating that too. But we think that would be a pretty good interim endpoint. Next slide, please. Great. Okay, so here's shows some sort of satellite imagery when we're looking at the southern part. So as I mentioned, there are condominiums, specifically Woodbury Place condominiums, and then terrace apartments, which are on the west side of the road. And we're proposing, of course, a shared use path on the east side of the road. So correspondingly, we are proposing an RRFB, rapid flash beacon, to connect from the shared use paths to the condominiums and apartments. And as you can see here, there's a call out right at that location. It's a little bit north of some of the condominiums, but we were pretty limited by what we call sight lines or the geometry of the roadway. We didn't want to create an unsafe crossing point. And so it's a little bit north. And then because it's a little bit north, we're recommending a little sidewalk linking to the south. As you can see there on the bottom, it's in yellow. Next slide, please. Okay, there's some visibility issues near Curtis Road intersection, which I mentioned. Speed limit here is pretty high, 40 miles per hour. And there's a whole variety of vertical crests and horizontal curvatures on the road, these technical terms up here. And so there's basically a vertical crest, horizontal curvature, vertical sag curve, which are only appropriate for lower speeds. When the speeds are this high, it is dangerous in that people cannot see sufficiently ahead to stop or to take defensive action when they're in a car. So there's all these issues there. As you can see, we call them out. There's 4 issues right near Curtis Road. And if you could take next slide, please, I'll show you what we're proposing to do. We have near-term and long-term recommendations here. We're proposing to trim the trees within what's called the site triangle to boost visibility. We're going to install signage for advisory speed signs at curve approaches for 30 mile per hour, back-to-back chevrons. That's what we're recommending, with possible flashing beacons. Speed reduction pavement markings to slow traffic there. Rumble strips in the center and or at the roadway edges, to slow traffic. And we think installing the trail itself will improve sightlines because of the required slight excavation there. Long term, we're recommending installing street lighting to address those deficient vertical sag curves. And then also reprofiling reconstruction of the road to meet those requirements. But that's a very long-term issue. Next slide, please. And you can see here, some of the things we're recommending. If you can look at that image up there, the speed reduction markings I talked about, those are little pavement markings that are placed on the interior of the lane. And what it does to drivers is when you're driving, you see all these little squares within the roadway, and it gives you an appearance of greater speed. And so what it does is it it causes you to slow down, or most drivers to slow down because it feels like you're going a lot faster than you are. These have been used across Connecticut, and they are one of the treatments we're recommending at Curtis Road. Next slide, please. So at Middle Quarter Road, moving north, we have some issues. The main issue is that Middle Quarter Road is pretty wide, about 33 feet. It's a single, for westbound drivers, it's a single lane that sort of all drivers, those going straight, those going left, those going right, all share. And so what we recommend is expanding that curve out just a little bit at Middle Quarter Road, reducing the lane width to about 14 to 15 feet. What that would do is make that crossing a lot safer for drivers as well as pedestrians and bikers. And what it also does is it shortens that crossing distance for people. We studied this. There's minimal impact on traffic flow. We're recommending high visibility crosswalks with stop bars at all approaches. New pedestrian signals to improve safety, and then new sidewalk on the west side of the roadway. That's the yellow on the top. So that's what we're recommending at Middle Quarter Road. Next slide, please. At Sherman Hill Road, moving north, we're going to recommend basically maintaining the current traffic pattern while implementing updated signal timing integrated with the new path on the east side. Preserve the two existing high-vis crosswalks at the intersection, but add a new crosswalk on that north leg where there's currently none. Retain existing left turn movements from Route 6 and the left turn from Sherman Hill Road. So again, basically keep the traffic pattern as is. Shorten the right turn pocket from Route 6, moving north, and add new green space in that space, and I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. Again, Sherman Hill Road features a shared left and through lane. We're proposing to keep that. We studied this, and it basically functions pretty well right now. It receives what we call a level of service, which is a traffic score that you get based on how much delay there is within the intersection. So it currently is B, and it's and with these recommendations, it would remain B. So pretty minimal changes. Next slide, please. Okay, here you can see what this looks like on the map. As I mentioned, there's new sidewalks. All right, I didn't mention this yet. We're also recommending new sidewalks on the south side of Route 64, Sherman Hill Road, linking to the Woodbury flea market. We've heard people say that was an important destination, and so we propose to just link to that. There's an existing sidewalk right there, so we just extend that a little bit east. And then moving north of this intersection, we do recommend sidewalks or shared use paths on both sides of Main Street, north of the intersection. And that's shown in orange, which would require new bridges. As you can see here, I mentioned shortening that right turn pocket for northbound drivers and making new green space. What that does is slow down traffic, but it also beautifies the town, beautifies the intersection. Next slide, please. Okay, here's what we heard about Doolittle Hill, Hollow Road, Park Street, Main Street area. The general concept is to switch the shared use path from the east side to the west side of the road at a mid-block location near Main Street. We talked about extending that. An alternative we could do is extend that path northward on the east side without crossing the street and then cross at Route 317. That's something that people brought up, and some people like the idea of that. So that's an alternative. Here are all the recommended options that we heard negative feedback about from the PAC. I'll just go over them really quick. We were proposing to close Main Street to through traffic, establishing a traditional intersection at Hollow Road and Park Road, close the southern section of Hollow Road, basically to increase park connectivity, and then close Doolittle Hill Road to vehicles, reconstructing it as a shared use path. Next slide, please. And that's what this looks like. But again, we heard negative feedback from people at the PAC, and we'd love to hear people's views today here on this. This is what we were proposing to do But we're moving away from that at this point. However, the important point is that the shared use path would cross north of that intersection in our design, and that wouldn't change in all likelihood. Next slide, please. So, again, these are issues which I won't spend too much time on. Traffic volumes at this intersection are pretty low, so that's a benefit to what we were doing. However, there's still issues. There's still a pretty steep grade if we were to create that intersection. It's still important if we were to do that, to maintain access for those businesses. In the previous slide, we recommended new left turn lanes at that intersection, which would widen the cross section and sort of go against some of the things we're trying to do. And it, perhaps most importantly, it would require a lot of time and a lot of money. And so like I said, we're sort of moving away from that alternative. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I mentioned here, we sort of hit the caveats already. This is just an initial concept. A few points though: creating this new crossing, transitioning the path from the east side to the west side doesn't really necessarily require these other sort of more involved urban design changes at the park that we heard negative feedback on. And so, it is sort of easy to pull apart and keep the crossing while maintaining the park basically as is. And the exact design will be determined during further design and engineering stages. So those are all the caveats. Next slide, please. Route 317, Sycamore Avenue, proposed upgrades. I just want to show people what this looks like. You just look at that for a minute, what we're proposing to do. Next slide, please. So we're proposing a suite of options here. New left turn lanes recommended on Route 6 with shared through and right turn lanes. This is to minimize driver intrusions into shoulders when they're waiting for left turning vehicles. People often whip around them in a sort of dangerous manner. New left turn lanes will also assist people, southbound drivers, turning into the government center complex where we are today. Better pavement markings will reduce the likelihood of drivers encroaching onto parking spaces on the northwestern side of the roadway. Related to that, new delineation of parking spaces. There's currently an existing curb extension that was put in a few months ago, and so we recommend to keep that. There would be ADA parking, some new green space. Specifically, the left turn storage lengths on Route 6 northbound would be about 50 feet, and the southbound queues would be could be shorter. Basically, those are based on volumes. And new sidewalk, better delineation of space on the southeastern corner. And again, there are a few traffic impacts with delays remaining the same. Next slide, please. Here I talked about that poor sort of curb sidewalk delineation. You can see here just down the hill, it's unclear sort of where the sidewalk is, where pedestrians are supposed to walk. And so we're recommending to sort of formalize that and extend that sidewalk north. And that would make life better, we think, for pedestrians and others. Next slide, please. Moving north onto Mountain Road, Judson Avenue. The existing crosswalk is currently controlled by a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, RRFB, but as we've all heard, yield rates are pretty low. A lot of people just do not stop. And so what we're recommending is an elevated crosswalk to boost pedestrian visibility and those speed reduction markings that I talked about. There's a few caveats here. We talked to the CTDOT about elevated crosswalks. They've historically been opposed to them, but they are increasingly trying them out at a few different intersections, a few different locations throughout the state, and they are warming up to them. So just some context. Next slide, please. So we created an engineering sheet that we hope will guide the town this spring on installing speed reduction markings. Again, similar to what we talked about near Curtis Road. These narrow your sort of visual fields, those squares, and create the impression you're going a lot faster than you are. Subsequently, you'll slow down. Is what we've seen. Next slide, please. Here's what that would look like. We basically keep a lot of the markings, but we raise the crosswalk and then install those speed reduction markings north and south of Mountain Road. Next slide, please. Route 47, this is an important intersection, and if you'll remember, this is the intersection with actually the most concentration of crashes, that map earlier. There's a lot of concerns about drivers approaching the intersection from the west on Washington and not stopping, or not stopping completely, and then making that high-speed right turn. So what are we recommending? We're proposing to expand the curb line to reduce speeds at that location. New left turn lanes on Route 6. For the southbound lane, a storage lane of about 60 feet. And then the northbound would be quite a bit longer, about 130 feet. What that would mean is when we put that storage lane for the northbound drivers is that we'd have to remove that crosswalk south of the intersection. Potentially no right on red signage for eastbound Route 47 drivers at the intersection. That's something we heard at the TAC and PAC that people would like to see. And I'll talk more about that in the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there's basically a series of governing principles that CTDOT requires. Basically, it hits some of them in terms of, and you only have to hit one, I should mention. Sight distances are adequate, so it doesn't hit that. There's an exclusive bike ped, or there will be an exclusive bike ped phase. There's some history of crashes, right turn on red crashes. We looked at there's a lot of crashes, period. We looked at the crashes and tried to sort of filter them out for right turn on red. It is a skewed intersection, so that is one thing that it achieves within the CTDOT guidance. So it seems possible, and it's certainly an option for the town to move forward on if there's support. Next slide. There you can see what that would look like. We're talking new sidewalks on the east side of town, a new shared use path on the west side. You see those new two left turn lanes from Route 6. And we're extending that curve into Route 47 just to tighten up that intersection a little bit and make that crossing shorter and slow people down, slow drivers down. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to go over everything here. Just to wrap this up, the shared use path would begin on the east side of the road at Woodbury Place with a new crossing RRFB north of that point to help those condo apartment dwellers there. There'd be potential property impacts north of Scubo Road, which is shown in the red right over there. There'd be a new sidewalk on the west side, shown in the yellow, near those condominiums apartments. Next slide, please. Moving north, we get to the Hollow Road location. We'd stay on the east side of the road until it crosses north of Doolittle Hill Road, Main Street, using that new crossing in RRFB. Again, potential intersection improvements could be implemented separately, and we've heard, as we said, negative comments on the wider urban design suite of options we're proposing there, but we can just keep that crossing. Those are separable. New parking set up at Route 317 Sycamore Avenue with new left turn lanes, boosting traffic at that intersection, allowing people to turn left easier into here and other locations. New sidewalk on Main Street north of Mountain Road on the east side, that's shown in the yellow, as you can see. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're on the west side, if you'll recall. So shared use path on the west side, the entire stretch, and a new sidewalk north of Mountain Road. New left turn lanes on Main Street, Route 6 at Route 47. New RFB at Middle Turnpike Road, which we're recommending. And then we'll talk about this a little bit more later. Depending on the replacement schedule of the Naugatuck River Bridge, we'd either recommend either replacing the whole bridge, or you could do that separately as a smaller pedestrian and bike crossing. Next slide, please. So here we go, the Naugatuck River Bridge. Overall, it's in pretty good shape, but there's some scouring. The superstructure is in satisfactory condition. The substructure is fair condition. So as I said, a new bridge could incorporate the shared use path, or the shared use path could cross on a new bridge that would be smaller scale. If this could be, repaired and is expected to last, decades more. Next slide, please. And the northern endpoint, as Casey mentioned, the ultimate northern endpoint is Flanders. However, that might be part of a later stage. As I mentioned, Middle Road Turnpike could be that interim endpoint, allowing that connection to the high school. And then, as I mentioned, there'd be a new crossing at Middle Road Turnpike with an RRFB, which would really, we feel like, help east-west connectivity in the northern part of your town, sort of the northern part of the center of your town, I should say. We really feel like there's not a lot of crossings here, and that new RFB would be helpful. Next slide, please. Traffic recap, again, the level of service, which is sort of the grade we give intersections, does not change from existing to future conditions for really any of these, which is encouraging, I hope. Next slide. And then there's historic considerations. We've heard from a lot of you from the pack that people are concerned about what the shared use path would look like. How will this fit into your historic town? They can be constructed using a variety of materials, which can sort of blend into that historic background, and I'll have further guidance of that in the report. Additionally, we're talking about new trees, new foliage, new ground covering between the shared use path and the road. And so in some sense, that'll sort of cocoon the shared use path from one's visual field, at least if you're driving. So that's another thing to consider. And then where retaining walls are needed, new stone-faced walls or other historic features could be incorporated. I know that's a really important feature for your town. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the shared use path is proposed on the east side of the town to avoid significant impacts. Near Hollow Road, the path would transition to the west side to better serve the main commercial area. We talk about urban design and access enhancements near Hollow Park. Some of the more advanced, some of the more involved ones, we're hearing negative feedback on. Traffic improvements, lane narrowing, improved pavement markings, safer pedestrian crossings, and strategic lane reconfigurations. Signal upgrades as needed. New RFBs in 3 new locations with associated markings and crossings. And then new treatments at Mountain Road to increase yielding rates for the RFB that you already have. Next slide. Okay, that's it. Thank you. We are more than welcome and are eagerly await all feedback, questions, and suggestions you have. Thank you.
If you don't mind. Hello, just real quick. My name is Rich Donovan. I lead the transportation planning division at NVCOG. And so first, I wanted to thank you all for being here this evening. We love when we get people to pay attention to the kind of work that we're doing and give us your thoughts. It helps to lead, it leads to a better project in the end. And so we're really appreciative of you all taking the time to be here. I wanted to briefly share some of the next steps and effectively where we go from here. So when we wrap up the study, after all your comments get considered and incorporated in, we will deliver the final study to the town. At that point, what happens next really is up to you. It's up to the town to decide if you want to move forward with any of the concepts, with all of the concepts, or make modifications and move forward with some kind of a hybrid between what has been ideated here and something that might make or something else that comes forward. At the end of the study, at the end of AECOM's contract, Casey and Evan will no longer be involved, but we as NVCOG do work for you here in town, and we will be here. We're here to assist in whatever way that you all would like from us. Whether that is searching for grant funds, working with DOT on your behalf, or helping to, help whatever it is that we can do to help make this a reality. So I wanted to share those as some of the next steps, as some of what comes from here. But truly the next piece is for us to take the feedback that we've received and will receive both tonight and over the next several weeks and incorporate that in. And so with that, on our website, NVCOGCT.gov, there is a project page for this. If you have not seen it yet, please do take a look. It has all of the documents that we've prepared up to this point for the study. It also has my email address. And so if you have thoughts that you want to share, but don't get to or don't want to share tonight, please send them to me. We're happy to incorporate them and want to make sure that we hear from everybody on this. And so with that, I do want to, now we'll open it up for questions, for comments. And at the request of the town, we do ask that everybody approach the microphone so you can be heard online, and then share your name and your address before the meeting.
Want me to come up there? Or you want
I think that's put this here.
Okay.
Something like this.
There you go. I'd just like to say, you were speaking of the lack of volume on the sidewalks, you know, in that you didn't really feel it necessary to divide things the way that some folks had. Yet you're suggesting like excessive widening of these sidewalks to accommodate bicycles, you know, and in a way, I almost feel it's creating a need where a need doesn't exist, okay? Because the SDAT study that was done for our town in 2016, I think it may have concluded in 2018, they recommended narrowing the lanes on Route 6 and creating a bike lane because our lanes on Route 6 are unusually wide. This would not require taking down trees, you know, or putting up guide rail. The guide rail conversations were very interesting because I recently had the same ones with DOT along 317 in front of some historic homes. Please, everyone, don't fool yourselves, okay? It's not going to happen. There is no interest or appetite to provide the type of guide rail that is on Merritt Parkway, even though it could be done. So when you're looking at that guide rail, that is what you're going to get. I don't even know why we're trying to make our town look like a highway with these guide rails, and then think that it's going to contribute, you know, to increasing tourism. Taking out trees, creating a concrete jungle and boxing it in with these guide rails, I don't think is going to create any type of New England charm. Thanks.
Just a quick reminder, please do state your name and address at the start of your comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was Karen Reddington Hughes, 182 Sherman Hill Road. Sorry.
My name is Cynthia West Pollock. I'm the owner of Madeline West Antiques at 373 Main Street South, which is my residence and my home and business. My mother opened Madeline West Antiques in 1967. Our family has been a part of this community. I just want to clarify a few points. I was surprised to see my photo of my shop and home used on the front and back pages of your study. Without my knowledge, permission, I request respectfully that the meeting minutes reflect that I was not consulted regarding the use of the image, and that this is an inclusion and should not be interpreted as an endorsement of the outlined recommendations. In the same, excuse me, in that same spirit of clarification, I did not fund or participate in the development of this study and do not endorse certain aspects of it. Specifically, I do not support proposed re-engineering of the corridor, excuse me, in the area of Park Road, Hollow Road, and South Green, located directly in front of my store. Our family has invested in preserving the character and history of this property and this town. Woodbury is known as the antiques capital of Connecticut, and visitors come from all over the United States, all over the world, still. So I'd like to see it, the feel of this town, this historic feel, be kept and not cemented over. As both a business owner and a resident who loves to walk, I believe one important measure should be done, and that is the repair and extension of existing sidewalks and make new sidewalks where necessary, which you already came up. This will directly improve the safety without altering the town's character. I do not believe that a shared use bike path is necessary for this corridor to be given this, shouldn't be here, okay? You do not need it. And I also have concerns about making our service road a dead end, which you suggested. I think you took it off though, which was our good deal. Okay. And that's about it. And I do thank all of you. I know it's hard work to do this, but I do hope you reconsider doing something big. It's only to just.
Well, it's only 30 Park Road. I'm just wondering if you're putting the cart before the horse a bit. There are a number of hulking structures along Route 6, many of which are in complete disrepair and need to be torn down. The gas station, the old Agway. There's one further north, I don't even know what it is. Used to be an old antique store. But those businesses conceivably could be revitalized. And they will require access. And I'm just wondering if that's been thought through before all of this takes place, that those structures be repurposed.
Brandon, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah,
No, I think that's an excellent idea and one which the town's plan of economic development and conservation relies upon in terms of can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I think that there's a lot of hope towards revitalizing existing buildings, like you said, because none of the future development, first of all, we're not anticipating a lot of it. Second of all, it all has to fit within the historic character. So, none of the plans or drawings are considering, any kind of changes to the character style of those properties.
How you doing? Tim Drake. I own Drakeley Real Estate, 256 Main Street South. I think the first thing I noticed when I looked at the presentation is your scale is off. So when you show my building and the bike path, the scales don't match up. So it's a little bit misleading. I love the idea of the path and the walkway. What I don't understand is why you don't use open space that the town already owns and run parallel with 6. You have the strong preserve. You have open space around the senior center. You have the Park Road Tower. You have plenty of land where you can do a bike path. And you don't have to, Route 6 is tight. There's a lot of traffic. Seems to be an awful lot. You're cramming into one spot with a fairly big lane. So I think that would make the most sense to me. And plus we have O&G, which they'll admittedly say they're at the end of their lifespan. They're going to have a significant amount of land that's really in the center of town. So any path you could do could run parallel with 6 for a good portion of it, if you got them involved in the decision. So I think there's alternatives. I like the idea. I love the path in Middlebury that runs all along 64. I'd love to see it connect to Woodbury. I'm a big walker. I think a lot of it is really good. I just think it's a lot of congestion in a small area. And I think we have a significant amount of land that abuts this general area that you could use that wouldn't cram everything down Route 6. Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I sat in the back of the room.
Mary Carroll. I live at 399 Beaconsini Road, but I own 2 Main Street North, Campfield Corner Pharmacy. I also am the treasurer of the Old Woodbury Historical Society. So, in that context, first, I'd like to just ask a question. Has everything that you're proposing in the Hollow Road area, other than maybe the walk or the bike path, been stopped? Is that completely put on the table? Because you neglected to leave us a way to get to our museum. You can't go down Doolittle Hill, you can't go down Hollow Road. We have to come off the back way and park on somebody else's property. We park on our own lawn sometimes, but that's to provide us parking. And you're taking parking away on Bicentennial Green as well for us. So I don't know how we're supposed to function anymore as a small nonprofit organization that gives back to this town.
I can answer that question. Just turn it around. Yeah, no, we very much understand the comment, and so again, none of these are designs or necessarily moving forward as projects immediately. But the study will not recommend those changes that would realign Hollow Road. We're gonna keep them in there as something that had been analyzed, but we will call out very specifically that public comment was against that change, and so we will not be recommending that action.
Even with the microphone.
Need better ones too. My other question goes to Route 47 and Route 6, which is where my building is on one corner of it. I've lived there my entire life. So I've watched that intersection forever. I did talk to somebody at one of the previous meetings about this. They promised they'd come and talk to me, meet with me, and look at the intersection with me, but that never happened. So the one thing they may have listened to me when I said people come down Route 47 and never stop before they turn. The state sort of fixed that for us by changing how they lined the road and narrowed it up so that the people can't pass each other to go down 47 south. So that seems to have made a big positive impact. This winter, I didn't hear all the car crashes. I didn't hear all the squeals. So they did work. So I have to thank somebody for that. However, I see things on this plan that say they're going to put a sidewalk in next to my building. The state owns half my building as it is. How much more can they take? They took all the parking on the side of the building. They limited us to 1 parking space on the side. The other businesses along that area have no parking. There's nothing to protect us as business and our entity that we need. And so this parking that the sidewalk that is there is remnants of an old concrete walk from when there was angled parking there historically, years and years and years. Then the state came and they put another sidewalk sort of thing on top of it, increasing the width of the size of it. However, they did that in asphalt and curbing, and then they had the water main connection through it, and they put some signs up in it, and then the connection to the light for the street is in it. So consider that a sidewalk. I'm sorry, I can't. And I try to keep it shoveled and clear as best I can in the winter, but nobody's walking there. So why you want to put that walk in and how you're going to fit that in there is beyond me. And the 2 business buildings behind me are in the same situation. They had no place to put their snow this winter. They had people out there with shovels and wheelbarrows trying to move that snow this year. So it is a consideration. It is an issue that needs to be addressed. And the other thing in the print part of the presentation, I believe I read that there was going to be parking lines put in at that intersection. Where?
Where did you see this? I'm sorry.
They said there was going to be parking at Campfield Corner. There was going to be parking lines put in.
Yes.
What lines?
Just to clarify that space in front of the business to make it a little bit more safe for pedestrians. I think that's what you're.
Sorry,
So-
do you mind speaking to the microphone?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I'll turn this to you.
Yeah, that's the smarter way to do what I did.
I worked on that.
I think I know what you're referring to. I was referencing, sort of clarifying that space in front of the building, in front of your business, so that it's safer for pedestrians. through painting
I don't
and,
understand how you're gonna do that. What are you proposing? I've never seen anything that showed it. So I don't understand. I own that parking property. I own that parking lot.
Okay.
So how are you gonna line it? Are you gonna stripe it so people know what the parking spaces are? Cause then I lose even more parking. Or are you going to just make a crosswalk kind of section, a crosshatch, so that pedestrians know where they can walk? Cause I'll tell you, I walked to school every day from the year I was 4.
Mhm.
Down that street, across that intersection, both ways. On the way to school, on the way home from school. I crossed from Canfield Corner Pharmacy across the base of Pleasant Street. I walked across Main Street towards Willie's restaurant. That was how we walked. It was the only way we're allowed to walk. It was a clear sight line and our parents didn't care. I walked by myself. All of us kids walked there and we didn't have accidents where everybody was getting killed and helper and everything. So to have the crossing the way they are is crazy. 47 Silver's Road, you have no sight lines, it's very difficult, but yet that's why it's been encouraged to cross. And now, there's nothing being done that's gonna change it. The other thing that's a problem at that intersection is that the street, I'm on Main Street.
Mhm.
Okay? My building's on Main Street, my parking's on Main Street. Pleasant Street comes down,
oh, sorry, I'll give you back the mic. I can remove,
most people can
The
hear that
reference.
pretty loud.
I can, it's really
I'm
good for.
too loud, I know, I'm sorry. Coming down Pleasant Street, where the grass ends at the end of that sidewalk, at the end of my building to the east, was a white line to make people stop there for the stop sign that used to be there. When they changed it to a light, they took out that line and moved it into my parking area. So it's in front of my parking. There are more accidents there from people backing out of my parking lot than you can imagine. There are people who will cross the street to walk to my building, so they don't have to do parking there. So the problems that are there are not being handled in the way they need to be handled for the community. Those are quick, simple fixes, but nobody cares to do them. This quick, simple fix on 47 worked with the lines. Move that white line back where it should be by the grass, not in the middle of a parking lot. I could go on all night and nobody wants to hear me, so I just, there's a lot of concerns.
We do want to.
I've lived here my whole life. I know where we walked, I know. None of us kids ever didn't ride our bikes because there was no bike lane. We went everywhere on our bikes. And the part of the sidewalk that's hard for riding your bike and for walking is along the section from Church Street south, where there's all the cuts for people's driveways. They have a right to have their driveways, but that makes the driveway go up and down, the sidewalk go up and down, up and down, up and down. Fun on your bike, but not necessarily the best thing to have. So those are the kinds of things that I would rather see somebody looking to see if there's a more creative way to fix it than making 12-foot bike lanes in the middle of town. People come to Woodbury to see what we have, to see the history, to see the charm of the buildings on Main Street, to enjoy the historic sites that they're not seeing in other towns. We don't have big box stores. They're not seeing those everywhere on every street corner. They're not all being taken out. People are preserving their homes. People are taking care of them. I understand there's some blight, but in general, there was a book published that the Historical Society has and has loaned to people by Tony Wren that talks about the architecture on Main Street. We have every kind of architecture you can think of in a couple of miles. Where in America are you going to see that anymore? Don't take Woodbury and make it into a cookie cutter sidewalk and big road like other towns, please. But don't encourage people to do it. Thank you.
I'm Richard Coates from 70 Strongfield Road. I actually have a long list of questions, most of which I'm going to email to you. But throughout the presentation, I was confused. How much has the state, the Department of Transport, had input to this? There are things that I think will be very beneficial for the town, like a raised crosswalk at the bottom of Mountain Road. I've been told from at other times that the state's not going to allow you to do that. Other studies we've had done, like the STAT study, suggested bump outs of crosswalks. I think that would also be an excellent idea. I've also been told the state won't allow you to do that. So, there are some blindingly obvious things that should have been done years ago, like the crosswalk at Middle Road Turnpike, which someone's going to be killed at very soon. That it's just so obvious, and yet I've been told that the state won't let us do that either, even though I think it's their expletive crosswalk. So how much of, and you mentioned about the no right turn. I wasn't sure at the end of your discussion, would the state allow you to do that? How you asked the state, could we do that? So what is the State Department of Transport said is okay? What if we wanted to go ahead with some of those things, do we have a whole extra process to go through with them? What's the status there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to address the question, when Evan referred to the TAC, or the Technical Advisory Committee, that is made up of DOT, various DOT departments, including the Project Development Unit, the Traffic Unit, and a few of the other engineering and planning units that would be involved in making some of these decisions. So they have seen every recommendation that you have seen, and they have initially signed off. Now, to answer the next part of your, or one of the next parts of your question, yes, there is a lot more coordination that would have to happen between the town and the DOT before any of the state road changes could be made. And some of them, we are hoping the DOT will consider making themselves, as it is their road. And especially some of the operational type changes, we believe DOT would be willing to consider building into their own planning and construction process. Unfortunately, at this stage, this is all planning work. And so these are initial concepts. We really would need to get into the engineering phase before we could get DOT to firmly commit that any of these changes would be allowed. But so far, of the things we've shown, they've reacted positively and expressed a willingness to consider for next steps. To some of the points, right? Raised crosswalks have always been you are not allowed to do those on state roads until they weren't. And so they installed one in New Haven 2 years ago as a pilot on a state road. It was incredibly successful. And so the roadway safety unit is now actually considering looking at about another 100 locations for raised crosswalks on state roads across the state. So they've made a lot of progress on flexibility and being innovative with some of these roadway safety proposals that we've come up with. And we're relatively confident we could get at least some, if not many of them, through the process and built out on the state road.
Hi, I'm Robert Kolesnik on 244 Main Street, south. First of all, just a question. On the Washington Road, Main Street connection, if I'm southbound going down Route 6, did you propose extending that sidewalk where it meets Washington Road there? Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, I'll let AECOM take the answer for this question.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, so my only comment about that is that larger trucks, especially ones with trailers, already have a difficult time swinging that corner from Route 6 onto Washington Road. If you bring the sidewalk out further, you may need to consider how that's going to affect the truck traffic going.
Southbound turning right. I'm
Correct.
sorry, we're not moving that curve.
Okay, that's what
Other side of the road.
Understood, okay. I agree with you that if you put a sign up that says no right on red there, that will modify people's behavior, whether it needs to be or not, I don't know, but that certainly would modify people's behavior. As far as the concept of making any of the sidewalks that we talked about much more cyclist friendly. I don't know that I'm in favor of kind of a Tour de France atmosphere on Main Street. I don't think that it's necessary to do that for people's recreational pleasure. I don't think it enhances the town as much as it affects the many pedestrians that use the sidewalks. And keeping in mind that from the Cannon Green all the way to Mountain Road, we already have sidewalks on both sides of the street, and they're nice sidewalks. And I walk all over town all the time. And I've been biking around town since I was seven years old. But I think that Tim Drake's point about, if you want to create something for cyclists to enjoy and to engage in sport and biking, we do have Bacon Pond Road. We do have Three Rivers Park. We do have a lot of resources for cyclists, both mountain bikers and places where they can enjoy that sport. I don't know that there's a big demand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a big demand for transportation, for bike transportation. People who don't use automobiles, who want to use a bicycle like you have in a big metropolitan area in Manhattan. There's a tremendous amount of people who ride bicycles to get from A to B. I don't think that exists in our town, and to undertake big modifications, a lot more concrete, a lot more construction and development, as Karen Redding pointed out, it does not seem to me to be necessary. I do think it's critical that we fix the sidewalks that are in a state of disrepair. We have a tremendous amount of pedestrian traffic on those sidewalks, and because we have sidewalks both sides, east and west of Main Street, basically from the old schoolhouse all the way up to Mountain Road, and then continuing in a few other spots. The sidewalks we have, I think, carry the pedestrian traffic, widening them a little bit. I see no problem with that. Certainly repairing them would be important. The concept of messing around with the streetscape or the area around Canfield Corners, I would be very much opposed to, because I think that it's as good as it's going to get aesthetically and functionally. To create something there that doesn't exist risks distorting the historic character of that intersection, which is precious. Same thing with the Cannon Green and Hollow Road. It's not the easiest walk if you're on the west side of Main Street, walking south. When you get to Doolittle Hill and you want to continue south, you do either have to cross there, which is not the greatest cross, or you walk through the grass on the steep hill. A little sidewalk, a respectable sidewalk along the hill where the bridge is now, would help pedestrians get to Middle Quarter Mall, would help them get to the next southern portion along the way. But to invite biking just for the sport of it, or to modify that magnificent park, and you have the Cannon Green, as Madam West pointed out, that's a treasured area. And I don't know that a lot of supporters can be garnered to greatly distort what's already there. And I think you can accomplish a lot by fixing the sidewalks and maybe carrying pedestrians more safely across that steeper part of the grass area with a sidewalk, which would not interrupt anybody's field of view, any of the visual that you get, which is fabulous. That's one of the first, looking west, if you're coming north into town, that's one of the first great views you have of the magnificence of the hill and of the looking out over Hollow Road, basically. And to substantially modify that, I think greatly alters the character. Pedestrians do need a little lift, if you will, on the sidewalks. Thank you for the time.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Fitzgerald, with on Prospect Road, Woodbury. Like a lot of the people commented, you brought up some good points in your study, and I would agree with them. My concern is, like, I think everybody in this room, we moved to Woodbury because of its quaint, small town New England feel. The antique homes, the architecture, everything about it attracts. So I have real concerns about changing the look of Main Street by widening, adding asphalt, adding concrete. And basically, we came here to escape the urban sprawl. We don't want that. We like the town. It's beautiful. When we have friends from out of town come to visit, they always comment to us about what a beautiful town, village it is, and how impressed they are when they drive down. That it's really idyllic is often what you get for comments, and I agree. And I don't see, although I really agree, we could improve sidewalks, I think, and that's important. We could enhance crosswalks. All of those things to me make sense. But I'm not sure if we need a bike pathway through the center of town, or we need in any way to add the asphalt on Main Street and change what is really a very pretty Main Street when you drive down. And that caused me real concern. And I have to believe there's other improvements we could do on roads in town, other than on Main Street. Our roads could use a lot of help. So I don't see where the priority is. I understand people enjoy biking and running and all that, but quite honestly, a lot of the things you mentioned aren't necessarily related to road design or anything, but are more people problem. Even the speeds, you can try and do it. I'm in favor of doing a lot of things to try to slow traffic, but personally, a lot of people are going to speed no matter what you do. You can put little blocks of colors and do whatever. I really don't believe it slows, not when you see how people drive today. So I don't know if I necessarily accept that. But I do have concerns, and like a lot of people, I think they don't want to change our town. We don't really want to change it. We like it how it is. And it's not that, and granted, I'm old. And so it's not that I necessarily am adverse to change, but change in this case, I don't think really enhances our town. I just don't feel that it does. And as far as, if people want to ride bikes, quite honestly, they can get through the entire area you're mentioning without being on Main Street. You don't have to drive down Main Street on your bike. You could easily circumvent it. And same for joggers or whatever. So why would we want to change our whole Main Street for, I don't know how many people, but quite frankly, I don't see that many bike riders in that area. We live way off of 47 on that road. Yeah, we get quite a few, but I've never noticed that many bikers or runners for that matter on Main, and quite frankly, they shouldn't be, in my opinion. So anyway, I appreciate your time and good luck.
Hey, my name is Bud Deal. Are you a vet?
Yeah.
Are you gentlemen vets? And how could you possibly know how disrespectful that sidewalk go right through the Memorial Park down at the Cannon Green from veterans who served in veterans who served in the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the future sites of memorials for Iraqi freedom, the Persian Gulf War, and the war on terror in Afghanistan.
Good evening. My name is Justin Quinn. I live on 24 Linden Road in Woodbury.
I'm a licensed landscape architect in multiple states and also a professional land planner. I'm also a combat vet, so thank you, Buck. I appreciate the info. So I took a look at the presentation, and forgive me because I haven't looked or paid attention until about a few weeks ago when a good friend of mine that lives on Main Street said, "Hey, in my office, did you hear this planning effort that they're doing in Woodbury?" So looked at it in my office, and we felt like the presentation really doesn't give enough to make any decisions at this point. It's pretty high level. And I think a group like yourselves would be better served if they came to a small town like this and did more upfront homework. And I have some criticisms, some of which I wasn't here for the whole meeting tonight, so some you may have addressed. But for instance, you reference historical character, and the study repeatedly states things about historical character, but there is no real analysis in your presentation. There's no inventory of character defining features. There's no visual impact assessments. And so while it's cited, there's no real meat in the presentation for us as townspeople to say, oh, they're looking at that, they're protecting it, and it's a reason for the moves that they're making in their planning efforts. Another big thing for me is that the mature street trees are essentially functionally ignored in your presentation. There's no tree inventory, there's no canopy analysis, no root zone study. And I know that might be to you as planners more granular. But for me, when I looked at this, it looked like you were making a decision to widen the walkway and not potentially put a bike path on the street. And I think when you look at things like a tree inventory study, that may change your mind on where the path may go. I thought the crash density diagram in your presentation, it's almost like you flash this crash density map, but there's no real critical data that backs up that mapping, and there is no distinguishing between vehicular accidents and pedestrian to vehicular accidents. So when you're deciding whether this town's feasible to put a bike path through, and you flash a crash density map, but maybe there's really not that many vehicular to pedestrian crashes. It makes me wonder, what type of crashes those are. You claim that topography made a decision in kind of the alignment of the path, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the bike path was associated with the walkway and not the street. But the presentation shows no topographic data, no section elevations, none of that. And so, for you to make that decision about putting the bike path associated with the walkway and not the street, and not showing any of the data about the topographic information, I just don't think it's conclusive enough. And why that's important is, there's a lot of mature trees along this corridor. And I think a 14-foot wide pathway, and I've looked at it, it's impossible to do without taking down multiple mature hardwoods. Another thing is, I think we don't really show any precedent studies that actually relate to a town of 10,000-ish people with this similar condition. And so it would be helpful if you could show folks, like, we're suggesting something like this that looks like this, and we end this presentation with 2 existing sidewalks and not a vision of what this could actually look like. I am also concerned, someone else mentioned this galvanized guardrail. I know there are some already on Route 6, but obviously that doesn't fit within the historic village. And then I also want to pick on something that Mr. Drakley mentioned. And maybe you could pull this up. If you could pull up slide 24.
One moment.
And that slide is the one where you have the different renderings. I believe it's slide 24.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull it up without trying to give you guys motion sickness.
Someone in the wall.
I'm sorry. It won't work for me right now. Let's see.
Maybe 25.
25.
You have it, you were just one slide on. I think, I know this is time, but I think it's important to point out something specific about this because it is some of the only visual aids that we provided in your study.
Desra, we can't see your screen anymore.
I do apologize. Zoom is no longer allowing me to share, so just give me 1 second as I try to troubleshoot for you.
So it's just the next slide down, 25. Can you make it full screen?
Yep, I'm trying. Just having technical issues on this end. I do apologize.
So this is, yeah, this is. So to put this in perspective for everybody, this is so misleading in what they're proposing. And this is why I think you guys need to go back to the drawing board. I mean, there's a lot of this type of stuff in your presentation. So you see this path here, yeah, it looks beautiful. It's a beautiful rendering. It's in front of Mr. Drakley's place. Trees look great, but it's really quite deceiving. This walkway and these people are smaller than that 30 to 36 inch fence in the background. So this walkway actually, excuse me, about 3 times the width of that than what's depicted in this image. And so I think that we need to provide some visuals that provide some confidence. So when people look at this, they say, "Oh, that's beautiful," and we're confident in it. So I thank you. I am for a more full accessible town of Woodbury. And I would love the idea of people being able to ride bike safely up and down Route 6. I just think that this falls short of protecting one of our greatest, aspects of Woodbury. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate your efforts.
Well, my name is Ed Cole. I live at 89 Judson Avenue, right off Main Street. I grew up in Woodbury. And my comments are going to be more general than some that other people made here. I found the presentation to be extremely dense, very hard to wrap my head around this issue, that issue, so on and so forth. But what I was wondering about is, seems like there's a lot of other players that typically would be involved in making any of these decisions. We have a very vigorous historic commission. We have a shade tree and sidewalk commission, and we're talking about sidewalks. Where are they? Where's their participation in this project? Anybody that lives, walks, drives in Woodbury knows that there's a problem, and there's got to be ways of addressing that problem. One thing I didn't hear is
we're talking about mechanical means of reducing traffic speeds. What about traffic cameras? They're beginning to be used more and more so. And I also am disturbed by the assumption that people will obey the laws and act nicely towards one another. I've been in a lot of cities where there's shared pathways and people on bicycles and skateboards, especially now that they've all become motorized and electronic, do not necessarily follow the law. And as a pedestrian, I've nearly been knocked on my keister more than once by people flying around and not observing the rules of the road. So several other people have talked about not needing a bike path down Main Street. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I also like to point out that when I grew up in Woodbury, there were 3,000 people. And it was kind of a spread out town. And we didn't have a really bunched together cohesive town center. And that kind of town is served by one approach. In our town, being more spread out, typically people drive to get from one place to the other. You don't really have a walkable downtown when you're doing your errands. You don't walk from the post office down to the French bakery. You get in your car and you drive. And so I think Woodbury's done a really good job of preserving its character from, I can look back 60 years and Main Street has retained a lot of the same character. People ask me, has Woodbury changed? And I say, physically, it has not changed very much. Socially, it has changed probably a lot more. Bigger population, more affluence in town. It used to be a small, normal, working class farming community with, different distribution of people in it. So, again, we have grassroots organizations in town, the Historic Commission, these other commissions that have always been the people that have made decisions about how some of this will happen. And, I don't see them involved. And I wonder just in general, like, who asked for this? Where does the authority come from to come in and say, you've got a problem, we're gonna fix it for you? And, if we were to move forward with any of these things, then we need to have a lot more accessibility to the plans and a lot more looking at them.
Yeah. Yeah, just to address both of those. So there has been a project advisory committee made up of many of those organizations and interests here in town who have been working on this with us all along. And to address the question about where this came from, why we're doing this, this was a study request submitted to DOT through NVCOGCT. And so every couple of years, DOT will solicit to the towns across the state looking for something like this, for a product that addresses a specific issue. And in coordination with the councils of governments, DOT will award federal funds with a share of local funds to get these studies done. And so this was submitted again by the town to DOT through us. And so that's where this one came from. It was a specific request from town.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Pollock. My mother's Cynthia. So I'm currently at 373 Main Street South. And I'm also a resident of Manhattan in New York. So I split my time. One thing that I just want to bring, actually a few things, but I would love to know if anyone here is located between Constantine's Restaurant and Spruce Bank Farm, because that really spoken about that. While I'm not necessarily for this proposed use path, I just want to make sure that if someone is in the room located at that between Constantine's Restaurant and Spruce Bank Farm, that they voice their opinion, because we've heard just from Sherman Hill Road up through, I think, Campfield Corner area. So that's one thing, just to be mindful of that. So maybe someone will email you, hopefully. And the other thing is, I would love a little bit more clarification on the South Green. And I know Bud Neal shared his opinion. I know my mother did. But but I think you over there, pardon me, I forget your name. But you said that there would, if this were to come to fruition, that the use path would go to the north side, which would go through the South Green, right? Okay.
Go to the map.
And then cross over like north of Doolittle. So one of the things there is obviously it's pretty obvious, nobody in the town wants South Green to be touched. But, you know, having that crosswalk, whether it's right there north of the green, or south of the green, but one of the things that I found in living in New York and in Santa Monica, California, and Hollywood and everybody is they put these awesome crosswalks in that they're textured. And in Newtown, actually, where I grew up, they have this beautiful red brick. So you see it. So it's not like the textured pavement, which I'm all for, but you definitely see it, which could add to the historic, you know, make it more charming. So there's, you know, a suggestion. The cameras, I think, are a suggestion. You know, I think Washington, Connecticut, they just made over 100,000 in 1 month from speeding tickets. So I think there's ways, and I realize that you guys are still going to hopefully go back and update the deck, but one thing in particular is really just making sure the residents between Constantine's and Spruce Bank Farm, or up to, I guess it's Sherman Hill, that they're represented, because I have not heard anyone speak from that side of the town. Okay.
Thank you. If I could just add one comment about the. I want to thank you all for your comments. I think I hear you loud and clear about the bicyclists, and I just want to reiterate one point, which is that this shared use path will benefit pedestrians as well. Oftentimes we've noticed in the sidewalks you have in town, it can be difficult for 2 or 3 different people to walk side by side. And so the intention with these shared use paths, and I hear you loud and clear that, hey, not a lot of people are biking right now. We want to increase that, but I hear you loud and clear. But we intend to have a wider sidewalk that will benefit, wider shared use path that will benefit pedestrians as well. One thing we also heard about when we were doing our initial outreach was there was a concern, at least among 1 or 2 business owners, that a lot of people come to your town and want to park one time and walk up and down the street instead of having to park and repark and repark. And that was very hard to do at this time. And so the vision there was that if you could park once on the street, you could use that shared use path to go to more businesses, go to more destinations in your town. So in theory, this could really help business. And that was sort of the perspective we were taking. But I hear you loud and clear on the cyclists and your concern that there aren't a lot of people who currently use it. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Taylor Swing. I'm at 29 Hollow Road. Again, thank you all for your time and considerations this evening. It's greatly appreciated, and I'm very much for the increased walkability and safety of our pedestrians in town, especially as someone who lives right near Hollow Park. I see many number of children and people come down Hollow Road every single day to access the park. It sounds like the bulk of my bigger concerns you've already heard from town in terms of impact of historical significance through the town green and through Hollow Road in particular, where I live. But just to sort of back that up and reaffirm my concerns, right now Hollow Road is very much used as a cut-through path to Sycamore Road. I'm sure you're very much aware of that. I fear that with an intersection there, that would only increase traffic, especially from those coming south, then going to Sycamore Road. They would turn left there as opposed to going up to the existing intersection. I also have, I know this is fine-tuned, fine granular that you would probably look at later down the line, but drainage is a big concern of mine. Right now, the drain accesses on Hollow Road drain to a wetlands behind my house, and when we receive significant rain, that water backs up into my backyard. I live in a historic property. I'm right next to the Third House, which is one of the most, if not the most significant historic property that Woodbury has. So I am concerned about flood risk for that area in particular that steep grade road would have into that area. And I also, was really excited to see this proposal and that I had hoped to see some of the issues with access to Hollow Park addressed. And I didn't necessarily see that. I see people particularly coming from Sycamore onto Hollow Road completely ignore that stop sign in front of Hollow Park. In the summertime, there are so many kids on bikes walking through there, and I see cars all the time just completely ignore that intersection. And I feel that maybe a raised crosswalk that you're proposing in town would actually be hugely beneficial right there in front of the park. How many people use that crosswalk to access the park and how many people walk down Hollow Road to access the park. So just some thoughts I had and considerations, but again, thank you for your time, and again, all for increased pedestrian safety. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Andrea Fitzgerald, I live across the road. Just had a few notes as we were going through this. You initially started by saying this is to address pedestrian and traffic conflicts. There's no data to support that in your presentation. There's been no mention of funding, where it's going to come. You just alluded to the fact that it's going to come from federal, state, and perhaps local. That's great, but if you're going to be servicing, and I'm going to be glib, 9 bicyclists, that's not a cost benefit that I would want to sign up for. If it's going to be funded by the state and feds, that's nice, but that's again, it's coming out of our pockets because we do pay state and federal taxes. I'm also curious as to know who requested the initial study, because I've lived here a long time, this is going on 25 years, and I don't understand where there's been so many conflicts with pedestrians. You didn't allude to any data. Again, for the intersection for 47, the accidents there, all those critical areas. And I'm a statistician by trade, and we all understand that stop signs are much more reliable than traffic lights. So it's very understandable that if there's a traffic light, there's going to be more accidents there because people run traffic lights, stop signs, at least they slow down. You can look that one up. Most folks that do walk the paths are doing it for pleasure. They aren't doing it to go to point A to point B. And I think the gentleman that spoke earlier that said most people want to park and walk. I don't think that's going to happen. This is not going to serve that purpose. I want to know there's nothing to support why a shared bike path or a shared pathway would make it any safer. We already have sidewalks. If you need to make them a little wider and a little smoother, I think that's a great way to use some of the funds, but they're not going to make them safer. You'd be hard pressed to give a data study to prove that one. This is kind of a note aside. You alluded to Curtis Road and the visibility. Maybe just cutting down the bushes, branches would help that. I don't believe there's many families that live on Curtis Road, and I don't think they would want their properties to be degraded just because someone thinks that curb is a little bit blind. Maybe you just cut back some of the foliage. I want to know how the transitioning across the road going at 317 is going to make it safer. You're going to have to cross Main Street where there's still traffic. If you have a walk light there, are the bicyclists, if they have this bicycle path, are they going to want to adhere to that? Because bicyclists don't follow the same rules that walkers do. That stoplight is not for walkers. Bicyclists are supposed to follow the rules of the road, and they don't. To a large degree, they don't. They don't signal, they don't hand signal, they're going to cut across, and you're creating more trouble. And my thinking, if you have more bicyclists on Main Street, you're going to be inviting children and inviting more people. So that in itself is going to make it less safe. I agree with Mr. Drakely. If you want to put a bike path, you've got many parallel roads, Route 6. Bacon Pond is a great place to be, a great place to bike, a great place to walk. There's not a lot of traffic on that road. It's safe. And people that want to do it for sport or for exercise are going to think safety. And a lot of people don't think safety. A lot of people say, well, I want to be on that road to be seen. I want to drive on that road. I have to be seen. I want to ride my bike on there because they're the Lance wannabes. They want people to see them. I don't think spending this kind of money, whatever that amount is, this doesn't seem like it's a very reasonable project, is going to assume you're gonna change that. Again, you didn't give any information on the crashes. I mean, two a year could be more than acceptable. Maybe it's 20, I don't know. And I just wanted to say, at the very end in your summation, you said if none of the LOS changes, if it doesn't change, then why do we bother doing this? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Willinger. I live on 60 Main Street South. I really appreciate a lot of the comments that you guys all made. Mr. Quinn made reference to the trees. I think that's a big concern of many of us. It wasn't really brought up in your presentation from my point of view. So we live in a part of Main Street that has magnificent, large, mature trees. I think that if you talk to anyone in Woodbury, they're all going to talk about the historical character. I think for many of us, nothing speaks to historical character than mature trees. So in front of my house, I have a red maple, which is an Easter rubrum, very close to the sidewalk, big, magnificent tree. And then across my driveway on the other side of the sidewalk. So this red maple is on the street side of the sidewalk. And I have a sugar maple on the house side of the sidewalk. So I think it's really clear. And if you continue walking north past my neighbors, they have beautiful, large, mature sugar maples on their property. And similarly, one of them is on the street side of the sidewalk and one of them is on the house side of the sidewalk. So I think it's really obvious. And I'm a landscape designer. I work for a landscape a noted Connecticut landscape architecture firm. So I have a little bit of knowledge about how when you increase the paving, how it's going to affect trees. And I think it just should be very clear that this proposal will seriously damage mature existing trees. Just want everybody to hear my opinion about that. I also completely agree. This slide in particular is extremely misleading. So thank you to Mr. Drakely and Mr. Quinn for building it. I also do want to say that I am all for safety and I appreciate bicycles and, you know, recreation and skateboards and all kinds motorcycles and all kinds of wonderful things. And I think people should be safe. I think that people should be able to get around safely. I thank you for putting this all together. Just really want everyone to be aware about how removing magnificent mature trees is going to affect our community. Thank you.
Hello, Robert LaRosa, 357 Main Street South. My question specifically is, what are the modifications that you wish to make at the Cannon Green?
We do not need to do the road reconfiguration. So the Cannon Green sketch, I don't know if you could pull that up.
What slide number is that?
We're going to say we're not going to make any modifications.
Right.
Certainly the green itself.
Right, the read itself would essentially keep the existing configuration with the the Main Street, the extension, the whole old alignment of Main Street. And then that road we proposed, that would not be there. We would keep the existing alignment of Apollo Road. And then the side path, which is parallel Route 6.
Actually, I think.
Yeah.
I actually think we may make one more change on that. I'm going to ask you guys to change it so that we don't do the side path through, near the green. We maintain the existing sidewalk along the old sidewalk alignment.
Are you talking like Veterans Lane?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
Main Street?
Yes.
Stays the way it is.
So we keep everything in that immediate area exactly the way it is now, based on the comments we've been hearing. Yes,
No modification to the planning and work zone.
correct. At least not as recommended by the study.
Barbara Parkinson, 212 Good Hill Road. I hope that should part of this proposal come to fruition, that there would be open communication with the DOT. Several years ago, a group of town officials, myself included, met and discussed the intersection of 317 and 6. And there were some modifications, as most of you know, as you went through Main Street. Part of it was done a couple of years ago during the summer. The DOT was working near the Lewis Building and St. Paul's Church. They were supposed to come back last spring. I never heard from the engineer or the project manager on that. So, and I know that was one of the slides that was here, the Lewis Building was there, that intersection. Especially putting sidewalks and parking at the Lewis Building. I would hate to see the state come in and make changes to that intersection and then several years later come in and rip it up and do something different. So I don't know whether you've been in contact, and I believe the name, I can give you the name of the contractor that, or the engineer that we were discussing this plan with. And I don't know where they were last spring. They were to come back and finish it. So I just hope that the open communication between the DOT and the project manager, whether it's the state again with DOC, maybe a DOT, especially with a different division, or the feds or the local officials would at least have communication so that we don't have to do this all over again at that particular intersection. Okay, thank you.
Nadine Cassini, 507 Main Street South. I just want to thank the landscape architects and designers who came up before me to express their concerns about the trees along Route 6 in Main Street. I heard, I was concerned when you said that you heard everyone about how they felt about catering to cyclists. But regardless, the sidewalks are going to be widened. So that's a little concerning because widening the sidewalks, they obviously need repairing. Everyone knows they need repair. But widening means you're cutting down trees. And like Matthew said, there's a lot of very mature trees all along Route 6. One of them is a sapling from the Charter Oak, state of Connecticut. So, those things have to be taken into consideration. The other concern was that I was surprised that the majority and the focus of this study was a shared pathway through town with very minimal attention paid to the speed of the traffic. That is a real concern, and I don't think I'm the only one here. I live between the two lights of 64 and Route 317, and it's a speedway. And I don't think putting little glass things on the pavement is going to reduce. We've had how many studies done, Karen, in the last 10 or so years of traffic studies of this corridor, and nothing's been done. You take your life into your hands crossing the street to get to the other side. So I'm shocked that that was not the focus here, and a shared pathway that no one really wants. We want the sidewalks repaired for sure. But I agree with Drakely that there's alternatives for something like that, in other parts of the town, but not on Route 6. Hi, I'm Julie Overton, 495 Main Street South. I live next door to Nadine. I also have a business on Main Street and reside on the same property where my business is. And one thing that I did not really address was any studies of how the widening of, in addition to a shared pathway, is going to impact accessibility and could, have the potential to deter business. Because I know with the existing sidewalk, it's hard enough for me to get in and out of my property with traffic as it is. And by adding that extra width, which I would be on the side where it would be added, I don't have a parking lot. I have a house on the street, a historic home, with a driveway that leads to the back where my business is. So anybody entering my property or exiting would have to cross over the shared pathway to go up my driveway and get to the parking area for the business. And that's just something that I thought listening to your presentation and wanted to bring it back to your attention. So, thank you.
I'm Carol Haskins. I live at 451 Main Street South, and I work in a business that's located on Route 64. So I'm very attentive to the Route 64 and 67, or 64 and Route 6 intersection. And I noted on slide 33, you weren't proposing any conceptual changes for the pedestrian interactions between traffic, but would encourage you to consider looking at the angles of collision with accidents coming out of the Ace Hardware ovens of France at that traffic light, and would encourage you to consider signage that the oncoming traffic from 64 also has a green light, because I think there is a lot of collisions that are happening with traffic coming out of that plaza and traffic turning onto Route 6.
Well, again, thank you all so much for the comments you made, for paying attention to the study and providing your feedback. We appreciate you being here for 2 hours this evening. We know it was a long time, but it's helpful for us to hear what you're all thinking and be able to incorporate these into the recommendations that we put together in the end. Again, this is not the end. This is far from the end. We will be gladly continuing to accept any comments or questions. You can, again, NVCOGCT.gov. My email address is there, our general contact information is there. So call us or email us, send us a letter if you'd like to send us a letter. But all of those comments we will make sure that we take into consideration and make it into the final study. And again, thank you all for being involved and being here this evening. It's very important to see so many people turn out.